Welcome to the Daily MBA, where business wisdom is served fresh and fast, straight from one of the top MBA programs in the world. I'll give you summaries of my lectures and readings, as well as the most important insights gained from an MBA, so you can apply all of this knowledge in every business. Let's get started. On today's episode, I'll start explaining all about strategy. And so strategy is a concept that's very used nowadays in everything that you're reading, seeing. Everyone is desiring to make a strategic decision. But what I'm going to start teaching you is how to create a sustainable strategic advantage. Because what you want to do is not only make a good decision that will give you excess profits today, but something that's going to give you excess profits over time, persistently. And this implies that even after your rivals can react. Because this is one of the main problems, especially in today's world. I think innovation can only last for a couple seconds before someone is already copying what you do and doing it even better than you. So what we have to do is find out a way to have a persistent productivity difference. And this is usually abbreviated as a PPD, a persistent productivity difference, because this is going to be one of the sources of a sustainable strategic advantage. And so this is going to imply that even after rivals can react, you will be earning consistently profits over time. And this is a very interesting term because according to economics, what I had been showing you in all the different types of markets was the PPDs shouldn't exist, right? Always the equilibrium was getting to zero profit, and we could see that firms could copy, they could enter the market, they would exit the market if they weren't doing something. But when we look at real life, we would find that firms are consistently outperforming, and there are some winners that continue to win. So how are they doing all of this? It's not through innovation, not through efficiency, not through pricing, not through quality. They may be very important, but they're not necessarily a source for the PPDs because they won't even stop competitors from copying, from expanding, or from entering the market, which is the key thing here. So where can you find sources of PPDs? I have one hack for you, and this is my big takeaway. What you have to do is something that rivals can't match or don't want to match. And how are you going to do this? First, let's imagine that a company is able to produce cheaper than the rest. If you can do this, you would lower your costs. So even if everyone is selling at the same price, you as a company would be earning a little bit more profit. This is one of the strategic advantages that we see many companies having today because they have this, let's say, excess profits only because they were able to lower their costs and do it as cheap as no one else could do it in the market. So that's one of the first parts. Do something that your rivals can't match. But lowering costs is something way harder than any other strategy. So what is what other people do? They do something that other people do not want to match. So let's say that, for example, a company is selling to a specific type of customers or selling only a specific price. This may be unattractive for many rivals. And then this is protecting you, technically, because it's avoiding rivals from copying you or entering your market. And so if rivals can't match whatever you're doing or don't want to do it, you are going to be reducing competition against you. And this means that all of the firms that are competing with you will be reduced. This is what I refer to as the competition against you. And this was something that I was really struggling with when I was learning. And it's how do I differentiate competition against versus competition for? Competition against would be what I usually knew as competition, which is just taking away, let's say, the other rivals. Because what does competition against you do? This is going to reduce your added value. If you have so many other players and the market's flooded by players, all of the added value that you're bringing into the market is getting every time a little bit smaller because other people are doing it and you're giving it to other players since you're all sharing that added value. So what you want to do is reduce all of this competition against you, which means play with less rivals in a better way. But you also want to do something and you want to increase competition for you. And I'm going to be talking more about this on the second part of my episode, but what you can do is that after you already handled all your rivals, now you have to handle your suppliers and your consumers, so what you earned doesn't get squeezed by all of those other players. So competition for you is going to look more at suppliers and consumers, and it's going to maintain the surplus on your hands, so it's not being reduced by others. So in this case, you do want to increase competition for you, but you're going to want to decrease the competition against you. And if this is tricky, don't worry, I was struggling with it throughout my whole term, but I'm going to give you better examples. What I'm first trying for you to understand is that when you do something that rivals can't match or do not want to match, you're going to reduce competition against you. And this is going to be related to making trade-offs. So Michael Porter, one of the greatest strategy professors, once said that strategy is deciding what not to do, because this way you can create a great business architecture in the one that you choose, what things you will do, but you will also decide, and this is a very important part, what things you won't do. Because these trade-offs are the ones that are going to be a very important source of PPDs. So why do these business model trade-offs work? First, because they are creating a finite number of competitors. They're reducing the number of players in your market. Second, they make it difficult for any company to replicate. So this, I'll be diving deeper into another concept that's called business architecture. But the thing is, if you are doing lots of different things, by trying to avoid just one thing, a company that's doing that thing won't be able to copy you because they could only take a few of the elements that would make them worse off. So by making this trade-off, you're actually avoiding for other companies to be able to replicate what you're doing. And the third point would be that even if they could do it, they probably won't want to do it because maybe your product requires a specific architecture, and so this is going to make rivals not going to worry about trying to do that. So all of these things are going to reduce competition against you. But then how can you increase competition for you, which is the other part that we want to do? For this, I'm going to start talking about a theory that's called the value capture theory, and this is an economic theory. It's usually abbreviated as the VCT, and this one is going to analyze who earns the consumer surplus in any given market, and it's going to include all the possible players, the buyers, the rivals, the firms, and the suppliers. So here we're going to have three important concepts that we need to learn. The first one is the total surplus. This is going to be the value created by all of the players in this market. The second one is the added value of a specific firm. We can consider it as specific firm X. So this, for getting it, it's going to be the total surplus minus the surplus that was created without that firm. So this is kind of obvious. If there was a market that was existing around, and then a new player arrived, this is going to be what that new player is adding. If we take him away, so it would be the total surplus minus this new player, it would just be the rest. So let's say here, we would consider that the added value is what this company X is bringing into the market. And lastly, we should consider the outside option. And this outside option is going to be related to a specific firm. In this case, let's continue with company X. So the outside option is going to be how much that company can be earned by doing something else than the analyzed market. And by something else, I mean either selling in another country, selling a different product, going into a new thing or strategy. So this is going to be doing something unrelated to whatever we're analyzing. And so what are the main things that we should consider? First, that the payoff that a firm receives is going to be higher than your outside option, because you are only in a specific market if you're receiving more than the other options that you could get. That's a basic point. Second point, the payoff, it's going to be always a little bit smaller than the value you're adding. You can't get more than what you're adding. It wouldn't make any sense because the market was working great without you. So you can't really add a little bit and get a lot. Your maximum is always going to be your added value. And the minimum should be also another type of basic concept that we should consider, and it's the leftover. So the total surplus minus the added value of every other player, it's going to be your surplus. So this is going to be the at least option. Let's say that's what you're bringing, so that's what you're expecting to get. So the best case payoff, it's always going to be what you're adding, your added value. And the worst case payoff, it's going to be the biggest between the outside option or the last thing that I was talking. So let's say what's left from the market. That should be the worst case payoff. And you have your best case payoff. But now let's analyze this with numbers so it starts making a little bit more sense. And we'll also study how to increase competition for you. So I'll start with a simple example where we only have one firm and one buyer. This firm arrives to a market where someone wants a new product, a new widget, and is willing to pay $10 for it. And if a firm tries to produce it, it will cost the firm $1. So the total market value over here would be 9, because this is what's being created in this market. It's the total. Why is that? The firm is creating something that someone's willing to pay 10 for, but it's going to cost at least 1. We're assuming it's a simple model, so let's just say it will cost 1. So total added value would be 9. How much did the firm add? The firm added 9, because if the firm wasn't there, the buyer would be left alone and would have nothing to buy. But the other important part is how much did the buyer add? Some people might think, oh, the firm brought all of the value, but not really, because if the firm produced this same widget and had no one to sell it to, it would be useless. So what happens here is that the buyer is also adding lots of value. It's adding the same amount because this buyer is the one that's willing to pay 10 for that. And if this buyer didn't exist, then probably the product wouldn't even exist either because the company wouldn't have any incentive in creating it. So buyer's added value is 9 and the firm's added value is also 9. So the best case, which is the only case, it's going to be 9 for both. The buyer is going to buy this widget and the firm is going to pay to its producer and everyone will be happy. Worst case would be 0 for both of them. Why? Because if the firm, for example, says, no, I'll only produce it for 11, then the buyer will say, I won't buy it, and the firm will say, I won't produce it. And this is destroying the value because it's leaving both with 0 value. So this is the simple example. Now, let's start looking into a more complex one. And here, I'm just going to add one more buyer. Same situation, same widget, costs 1, one firm's producing it. The buyer was willing to pay 10, but I added a new player, and this new player is going to be willing to pay 12. So, what is going to be the price? And here, I don't want you to intuitively jump into saying, oh, the price is going to be the highest price, because companies always want to say at the highest price, because it's not going to be that simple. We first have to do this analysis, value capture theory. So how much value did the firm add? It's going to be somewhere between 9 and 11, because we already had analyzed our 9 with the first player, but now for the second player who's willing to pay 12, this is adding more value. This is showing that we created something that was worth 11 and we took the 1 away. So we're adding into this market a value of 11. And it's going to be somewhere between there. What is the buyer's added value. And this is going to be very important. Here, buyers would be adding 0 value individually. And why is that? Because buyer 1 is not going to add us any value. He could be there, he could not be there, and still we would have someone to sell it for. So that buyer is now, let's say, worthless. Buyer number 2, on the other hand, could also be worthless because if he decides to disappear, we would still have someone to sell the widget for, but he's also adding a little bit more. So it's going to be between 0 and 2 for that new buyer. The other one is going to be adding 0. And so our worst case profits are now going to be what we had seen before, 9. But what are going to be the best case profits? They're not going to be 11. We're not necessarily going to charge for 11. Because what happens here is that this is going to be a bidding process, let's say. As soon as a firm releases, the 2 buyers will start competing against each other. I want to buy this by 9. Oh, I'll pay 9.5. No, I'll pay. But what we have to consider is that as soon as we pass the 10 threshold, this is going to push the other one into not being able to push it forward. He's going to stay at 10.1, 10.2. It's going to be more of a negotiation process from that second buyer and the firm. So here, it's not sure that we may have this, but what did it bring for us having 2 buyers? This increased the competition for us. And that's what we want to do. We want to push competition for us up because this is going to lead other players to start bidding against our product and be willing to pay more. And it's going to give us at least more than the minimum that we would have paid if we only had one single buyer. I hope this is clear, and on my next episodes, we'll keep focusing on how to build this sustainable strategic advantages. So stay tuned.